Hello everyone and welcome. Hopefully you guys are doing great, and we're gonna be delaying chapter number 1 for now. We're gonna be releasing it on Monday, but in the meantime, let's get started with reviewing what we learned yesterday. So I want first to get you guys set up on the basics on an overall trade setup, right? And that's what we're gonna be focusing here, and then we're gonna get started on chapter number 1 on Monday, after I get also all my technicals ready for the live stream. Because guys, I don't know why, but I've been fighting pretty much every day with technology since yesterday. So other than that, let's start changing F Ethereum with F Adobe, man. It's been a headache. But guys, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you guys being here, even if we started a little bit late. Also, shout out to Army Piper. We see username, what is up, my friend Alexander G. We also have Lawson Crypto. What is up, my friend Crypto Boyo? What's up? By the way, I have created a background for you, my friend. I need to import it here. So that's what I'm telling you guys. I have a ton of stuff not being integrated, but I do have the dedicated background for you, my friend. We also have Alexander G, the best mod in the world. Welcome. Thank you for being here and helping me out here. Jesse Jax, what is up? And of course, Army Piper in the house. What is up, my friend? Thank you so much for being around. Also, if you want, please click that like, and also a share will be much appreciated. So let's get started seeing Bitcoin and also doing a little bit of recap what we left out, because it seems like we have the market moving, and this could be a great opportunity to do some live trade setups. All right. Also, guys, right here on the side chat, let me know what you want me to take a look at, and of course I'm going to be adding it to a list. Make sure you put a little thumbs up next to it so I can find it faster. And we're going to be doing analysis time frame and also asset by request. So let me know what time frame, what asset you want me to take a look at, and I'll do it. So AG or Lost on Crypto. Oh, I see. So I thought it was the first request. Perfect. Let's get it started then, guys. All right, maybe a little swoosh or something like that might be also a good integration. Maybe I just have to do it by hand or by mouth, right? So we'll see. At this point, we have 4-hour Bitcoin here, just going to the dynamic reactor, right? But let's get started with no indicators at this point. Remember, it is better to see market structure. So that's what we're going to be getting started with, right? What is the market structure that we talked about? Remember, we have going up, right? So uptrend. Right, we have sideways trend, right? Maybe like that, right? With some of fake outs, right? But overall going sideways, maybe slightly tilted down, maybe slightly tilted up, but at the end of it all, sideways overall, right? And then of course going downwards. Remember that usually we have inner structure. For example, you can have higher highs, right? And higher lows within a macro uptrend in here. So that's what we call either inner structure, micro trend, or directional trading, depending on the time frame that you're looking at, right? Then we also learned that there is no the trend, right? If you just go high enough, you're just gonna see that there is not enough information. So usually the trend is either daily, weekly, or monthly, if you really want to push it, right? But the best trend that we're going to be looking at, it is your own time frames, basically where you are the most profitable, right? When you can see better and identify the actual trend of movements, right? That's going to be your trend, and that is going to be the trend, all right? So other than that, we can see a rounded top, maybe a double top in here. We can identify a range, and also we can identify upgoing or upranging, uptrend and downtrend, right? We also visited and talked about Wyckoff. The only thing that you need to worry about Wyckoff, it is just the structure. So let me show it to you really quickly, just so we have it in mind and we can remember what we're talking about it, right? So basically, by the way, shout out to Academy Binance, because they have one of the most simplistic ways of showing this up, and I think this is good for beginners. Maybe we can start doing this on the Piper Academy. That could be a great idea. Maybe we can explain it, make a little blog, and then show it to you guys. So basically, this is what we have for accumulation, right? And also, this is what we got for distribution. If we looked at this, look at that. Lower high, higher high, higher high, higher, lower high. And we're kind of like having like a rounded top at these points, right? By losing this range, basically just confirming a downtrend. And then at that downtrend, well, we talked about that we have something like this set of patterns here, right? Where we have a V-shaped recovery, some ranging, and then possibly a breakout continuation. So this is the rounded top that we're talking about. And finally, the V-shaped recovery, and then the range that we could be trying to trade, right? There's a little caveat here. We'll see it more in advanced classes, but we could be also looking at a shortened range. But anyways, we divide a range into parts, right? We divide the lower range and the high range with a median at the center. The median is just an area where we're going to be seeing resistances, right, or support, but mostly we're going to be seeing the price hover for a little while it decides if it wants to go up or down, right? So basically that's why even a trading view, when you do draw a price range or a data price range, let's take a look at here. I have it turned on, just turned off, just so you know. But if we go to style, there we go. We can turn on the center line. Where is label background? Let me see. Maybe I'm just confused of tool. We'll take a look at this one here. Right there. It usually comes in the middle line. Also, another important tool that I want to show you guys, it is in the second one to the right, regression trend. This is a great tool to start marking up the trends. So for example, there we go. We start here, we push all the way there, and look at that. It gives you upper range, right? Lower range and median line of the range. So you can see that even TradingView does use the median right there. And you'll see many tools calculating the median. All right. Now that we know basic structure, right? Let's remember what we learned about support and resistances. Supports and resistance, they are all lines. But most of lines, they represent zones, right? What kind of zones? Well, those zones where we have a lot of reaction. Remember, a trend line, usually it is identified as support resistance. It is identified with a line, with a straight line, which represents some points of importance in the market. For example, right here, you'll see that every single time that we touch that line, we bounce up. Look at that. We bounce up, we bounce up, we bounce up. You get the point, right? And every single line, as it represents support, in the future, when we lose that support, it's going to represent resistance. Every previous resistance becomes new support. Previous support becomes new resistance, right? There is a caveat here. Remember that the charts are created by people buying and selling, right? And that means that, remember that most of the traders or beginner traders in the space are newbie traders, and they are sentimental traders. Therefore, in a way, we're charting sentiment on the people buying and selling. So do not expect it to be like completely perfect. Expect it to be perfectly imperfect, right? That means that we might have a little bit of slack between those. That we're gonna have a little bit of slack between those supports and those resistances, right? That's why we call them, or it represents zones other than straight lines, right? Those are supports and resistances. And then trend lines, which a trend line, it is a dedicated tool to measure trends. The trend is over when the trend line is broken, all right? Which again, it is a support and it is a resistance. So let's draw right here a line that mostly goes through all of those, right? You'll figure out that sometimes I let it go through that line, right? And I don't really care about that, as long as I'm catching as many important zones as I can, right? I can either do this and then create, let me do it sideways so you have a better idea. So, and then I can create a box around it like this, right? So my perspective of the line becomes the median, right? So look at the median here. I put it there, And then based on that median, let me do it like this. I know in my mind that I could be maybe cloning this, right? And putting it at the top for the very toppy movements, and then cloning this and putting it at the bottom to grab the bulk of the important zones, right? So you can either, for your trend line, draw your outer ranging line, right? Your median, or your lower or inner ranging line, right? Regardless of what you do, remember that they represent zones and they should have a little bit of slack, right? What I like to do is kind of like a go for the median, because my brain already knows that I can have some slack or some fake outs, and then I compensate by volume or by a support and resistance confirmation. We'll see that in a second, all right? Let me clear this up. A bearish trend, it's measured at the top, right, with a trend line like this. When we talk about a parabola, let's draw a box in here. And remember your very boring math classes, right? When we have the X and Y and sometimes even Z axes, right? And we talked about a parabola, something like that, and we have X equals whatever, whatever, right? This is an equation between two segments that they are not linearly or progressively linear described. They do have a difference between one weakening and one getting stronger. So that's why you see a curving here, right? That's also some signs of liquidity that can represent trends. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Like, I think we have the perfect trend zone in here. For example, you see, and I think we can all agree that starting somewhere around here, because that's where we lost the low and the high, right? Basically, we broke out of the previous range. We can see constant high, constant low, maybe here with a little bit of a fake out, but at the end of it all, going all the way up there, right? But if I do a trend line here, well, look at that trend line. It's kind of off, right? And that will be telling me that the trend, it's basically breaking here, retest, and then faking me out again before going up. So does that mean that my trend line or the trend line theory, it's broken or it doesn't work? Not really. It is that at this point, this could represent a support zone, all right? And I do remember when we were there, many of the traders were looking at something like this, right? Where we were seeing at a breakout, and then we see a secondary breakout. But what I want to suggest in this kind of sections, it is go for smaller areas, basically trying to get the inner range. By the way, if you're having some trouble finding the trend, remember you can always go here to your secondary tool, right? Right next to right below cross, and then use regression tool. Mark where it starts, marks where it ends, and then you'll have a basic overshoot of the trend, all right? It's not gonna be perfect, but you'll have a basic understanding. Of course, as the times goes by, you pull it until you have a better description of the trend channel, all right? Going back into the parabola, all right? How do we measure that with trend lines? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Remember, everything it's sort of up to you in this case. Why? Because there's between geometry, there's always a relationship between lines, right? As long as you start connecting the lines, you can build up that connection or that reference from one point to another. That's exactly what a parabola is, right? By the way, parabolas on trading, doing this, usually create what we call liquidity zones to be grabbed, right? Usually we aim for these kind of breakouts to between one center, right, or half, or a 25th of a pullback at the breakout. So basically, when we break out, we're looking at half, right? Or even at the 25th, one of the 25th areas here. So basically, a 1/4 measurements out of this kind of like curved parabolas, all right? But going back, to what we started with, which is trend lines, we do our trend lines. This is an uptrend, right? And we measure the uptrends where? At the bottom. Guys, you will always hear something that has been said out there, which is try to think outside the box, all right? Let me give you right now, right here, one of my secrets. And when you see it, it is not really a secret, but when you start piecing it out, you'll see that no many people think it this way, right? So what I'm trying to see is kind of like a borrowing somebody else's brain, right? And trying to see it like if I knew nothing about it, right? So who told me that it should be measured at the bottom? Why couldn't I measure it at the top, right? So let's clone it and look at that. It just like magic, kind of like a fits the top, right? In fact, yesterday I gave you this hint. When I start seeing the uptrend not reaching the top, right? At that point, I'm looking or I'm expecting that it is becoming a lower high in the inner trend, all right? The next step for a trend breakout, remember, is breaking the trend, right? Usually breaking the trend line creates a lower low, right? And then my entry for a trend reversal, it is a confirmation, either bounce off the trend line or creating confirming a what? A secondary lower high, all right? So measuring a bullish trend at the top is giving me strength indication. Today in the Chart Prime Discord, I got somebody asking me, hey OC, what tools do I use to measure trend strength? And I told him, you know what, there's a lot of tools, right? Even a trend line used in a certain way can help you understand the strength of a trend, right? So if then, let's add one more thing in here. If then maybe, just by curiosity, I'm cloning the line, by the way, a center line, I'm having a median, right? And guess what is it giving me? It is giving me a channel, right? So I told you, this is nothing new. This is not something that has not been implemented, but just piecing it out or taking it piece by piece, you start understanding that every single line can give you different perspective. And the sum of those lines will give you a massive perspective of where things are happening and going, right? So like this, and I do see Crypto Pollo. We have Ondo, perfect. Let me see if we got, let me just catch up here. Alexander, vamos, I'll see. Yes, let's go, vamos. Glug, CPO. CPO, I don't know if that is, oh, Crypto Pollo, sorry. Let's see. Jesse Jack, Merry Christmas. Welcome, my friend. Any other suggestions? So when we get started on taking a look at your assets, we can go dive straight to those. So we have so far Ondo by Crypto Pollo. So let me know if there's anything else. All right. So at this point, we can grab a lot of information just out of 3 itty bitty tiny lines, right? Something important is that we're going to be looking at the median line tightness. Basically, if we go down and we see that we are just hovering over it, well then, we're going to be waiting or looking at volume. We'll see then volume in a little bit, and that will describe basically whether if you're looking for a break up or for a breakdown, all right? Nevertheless, remember, a trend line divides your trend. So basically, what happens here, remember, it's not about your breakout. Now it's time to go for chunky candles. I know you love to see this because I also do, right? It's not about your breakout. It's about your what? It's about your retest. And off we go. We're going to be talking about the breakout retest more ahead. And I do have a set of rules in order to see either if we're going to have a breakout retest, or if we're going to have a multi-candle retest, or if we're going to be having just a 1 week retest. So as you can see, we're going granular, right? And maybe a little bit more complex, more complex, more complex, until just from being very simple, we can add enough information to it to then start going for pinpoint entries. Even right now, remember, with only trend lines, or even with 2 indicators in our screen, we can start now taking trades. But we're gonna be going from 0 to hero on these sessions. So at this point, this is what we're looking. And also look at that. If I start extending this line, so let me just shift, or try to keep it as close as I can, you'll see that everything holds a perspective. All right, I told you guys, this is pure geometry. This is also psychology charting, right? This is why I fell in love with charts. If you don't know, my background, it's an architect, right? I love technology also, but when I found that everything is connected in a way, and better yet, you don't even need to know math to see this, right? You kind of like start throwing lines for logical points, right? And you see how everything started making that beautiful Fibonacci segment, right? It's not that you're gonna be seeing a little curve, but what it means is that everything is connected in a way, right? And the most basic point or the most granular point in our analysis is gonna be your line, right? Either for support, either for resistance, or either for a trend line. All right. So basically, we're over with the recap, right? And now let's go and dive into actually measuring stuff and trading with what we know already, right? We're also going to be adding our Market Dynamics Pro and Market Dynamics Market Oracle Plus, and of course our oscillator. But at this point, guys, I want you guys to start trusting yourself in what you see. And guys, you don't need to see a line, a chunky bar like that, right? Even we're going to be going into a further class on candlesticks, how they're built, what every single part of it tells you, and what maybe 1 or 2 candlesticks can tell you about the price action, where we can relate to sentiment, all right? So, but at this point, remember, market structure, it's the key, right? Zoom out, zoom out. You're not going to be regretting that. So at this point, let's start applying what we learned. So we have a bearish trend. We can absolutely see it. Let's try to draw some trend lines in here. Look at that. If I go by the very top, I think it's a quite a good one, right? Let's make it a zone. So let's just cloning that, right? And let's push it all the way down here. And I think this is a good enough of a zone, right? Now that we can measure the trend, let's do also measuring the bearish trend, like thinking outside the box. Let's measure the bottom part just to see what's like, what is telling us, right? So far, I don't see much in here. Maybe something like that, right? Where I can see catching this, maybe a fake out, catching all of this, right? Previous supports becomes new resistance. So a little creepy here, but let's just keep it there just for reference. In fact, you know what? Let's just edit it and put it a little bit more, or make it a little bit more transparent, right? Let me see. I can even make it dashed for good measurement. And finally, let's try to clone this other one. And let's push it all the way down somewhere around here. I'm finding with you guys something that makes sense, right? So look at that, maybe grabbing these two. Maybe then if I just push it like that, well, maybe that started making a little bit more sense, right? Where I have some support and resistance. So I think that's it. Now let's use the same line to start looking for support and resistances, right? Let's grab this. Let's do horizontal, and look at that. I see some resistance here. Maybe here I already have my trend line. Look at this. Maybe I have some support or another resistance around here. You see that? Maybe right here I have a, let's even move this one somewhere around here, right, for the next one. And by the way, guys, when you have too many of these supports or resistances like this, like together, remember they're part of the same thing, right? This is the channel that we're looking for. So far, we are into resistance trying to push through, right? So what I always tell you, it's not about the breakout. It's about the what? Of course, you guys know it. Yeah, let me hear you. Exactly. The retest. And then when we start seeing maybe a couple of candles going back up, that's it to our TP number 1. All right. Now that we have the charts ready to go, very cleaned up, basically not using anything, any indicators, just lines, right? Now let's do our life a little more easy. Let's turn on our, there we go, our basics. What is our basics? Our dynamic reactor, which is a volume measurement, all right? OC retest, yes, Buck, welcome my friend, happy to see you. Weak Wife, what's up Weak Wife, great to see you around, love that you are here, really appreciate it. Who else? Dynamite, what is up? Did not see you here so before, so welcome, great to see you now. Let's see, let's just finish up with one more thing in here to compare what we're having, right? The dynamic reactor, and I'm going to be giving you a couple of insight of the dynamic reactor, right? Talking about volume. So this here, it is not an EMA. It is not, right? It is not an MA, right? It is not. It is not a VWAP. It is not, right? It is a high volume area. This high volume area, it's basically a pinpoint part of what is the most important volume by side and by bottom. Let me give you a little bit of insight in here because this is representing volume and how we have doing between many other things because this have a lot of code in it, right? But kind of like how it works. If I grab and I go to indicators and I do volume, right? Just a plain old volume here, right? Let's put it here. And then I do the volume, the VPVR, volume profile magnifier. Let me see, where is it? Technicals should be the VPVR. I have them favorites. Oh, those are the blocks. Volume range profile. There we go. The volume range profile. So let me just get rid of this one. We're not going to be using this one. So this, it is the volume at this area, right? So when the price was here, how much volume it increased? As you can see, it's going up. So what happens, it is that we are representing two kinds of volume. Volume, what is this? Volume V, vertical volume, right? And horizontal volume, all right? Guys, this is not an exact science, all right? This is not exact science because we applied many modifiers to the volume to give you an actual, something that you can actually rely on, right? But when we start seeing these kind of peaks, right, that we go up in here, right, and then we go up in here, you can see that this start looking like this one there. So when we start dashing or showing you here at that point at shelf, right, so at those important zones, maybe I'm just a little bit crooked, there we go, right, plus a smoothing factor, well then what happens, we build point by point our dynamic reactor. Again, this is not the exact math, but this is the fundamental how we start charting volume in something that is actually attached to your price action, right? Something that you can see right away in your price action and not just, all right, how could I read this, right? All right, how do I interpret this? Well, then you don't have to interpret anything. You just use it as an EMA, you use it as a BWAP, you use it as whatever you like, right? But you have it right there on your screen acting as everything else, which is either support or resistance, all right? And we make it much more easier to give you, look at that, green for support, red for resistance. All right. So now that we have that out of the way, so you know basically what you're looking at when you're looking at your dynamic reactor. Let me just get rid of volume. And also, let me get rid of the VPVR here, all right? So what we got with our support and resistances? Well, look at that, your support or resistance channel, right? It is marked and defined in a pinpoint with your dynamic reactor. And guess what's happening here? Look at that, we're pushing through, right? What do we need when we push through a big volume, a big area of volume? We need big body candles, right, to confirm that we have a final push through. Look at that, small candles, big body candle going through, right? It's not about your breakout, it's about your retest, and off we go. So we are having that push through. What are we expecting? Breakout, retest, and off we go. All right. So far, that's what we got on our market and our dynamic reactor, right? Let me just clear this up. And then let's bring up our oscillator. Our oscillator is basically a ribbon. This ribbon measures momentum, right? Momentum, just like in real life, it is a measurement or relationship between what? What is momentum on real life? It is a relationship between speed, right, times what? Well, in the simplest way, right? Speed times mass, or velocity times mass times, like depending on what formula you're using, but at its simplest, it is a relationship between the speed and how big it is, right? What is the speed? Money flow. What is money flow is basically how fast are people pushing money into it, not how much, just how fast, right? Maybe you have 4 people desperate to buy Bitcoin at whatever price it is. That is speed, right? But maybe you have 2 whales that want to buy $30 million, right? But slowly, that is volume, or that is mass, right? So mass equals volume, and speed equals money flow. Again, it is not exact math that we apply here, but it's fundamental, right? So having said that, we can measure momentum. So when momentum is peaking, just like a rocket ship goes up, picks up, and then runs out of fuel and start going back down, right? So that's what we're expecting. And then we apply an RSI. Let's not dive into an RSI at this point. You just need to see that we have overbought zones and oversold zones. This is the basics for you guys to understand the oscillator, all right? So once you have this, and by the way, if you don't have access to the indicators in here, don't worry, add your EMA, right? The 55 EMA plays out very nicely. I'll give you also a 4-hour attachment that works very nice like this. Volume and EMA areas, we'll talk about it, but basically you can just start changing until start pairing with this. I'll give you those settings in the next class. And then on your oscillator, I recommend that you do the RSI prime thing here, right? You're going to be using it very much like our oscillator here, but this one is free, all right? You're going to be looking for small, itty-bitty, tiny candles at the bottom for flip of the ribbon, and also you're going to be seeing at this dark zone as you see your oversold, and this other dark zone as you see as your overbought, all right? So basically, those are the free indicators that you can start using right now to start pairing what I got right here with me. Let me just remove this for a second. All right, now, let's go and predict what could we be seeing here. Well, we're pushing through. We are getting exhausted. We don't have a reversal, right? So we can speculate that we can come back down for previous resistance becomes new support if we have a big body candle breakout. Let's now jump in and start looking at what you guys are trading. I have Ondo here. Let me see if I'm missing something. And then we're going to be taking a look at what you guys want me to trade. So, Tron. Then what else do we have? Guys, if I'm missing one, please send it again. So I see it right there. I like chunky candles. Nice. Uh, oh, Bach. Ah, man. Man, you're hilarious. Love it. Who else we have? Obviously, should you read a bedtime story? Man, why? Is it too boring? Spaghetti time, we see. All right, E equals MC squared. No, that's Einstein. That's relativity. That's, yeah, relativity. What else, guys? Let me know if you have anything else on trading scenarios, so maybe we can take a look at it. That's my favorite pickup line. Kelly, what did Kelly said? I've been my trend lines. Thanks for going over this today. I've been users of my trend lines. Thanks for going over to it anytime. My pleasure. All right, let's do Ondo, and then let's do then Tron. All right, perfect. We have Ondo right here. Let's take a look at the perpetuals because that's the one that kind of like moved the fastest, right? So far, let's zoom out, right? Before we go to chunky candles, let's zoom out. Let's use naked charts. By the way, next Mondays is going to be, oh no, I don't want to give it away. You'll see, but look for the thumbnail, guys. I'm preparing that one. It's going to be, yeah, why not? It's going to be trading with OC naked charts. Naked charts, all right? Charts is little. All right, maybe, I don't know. If it's too much, let me know. So basically structure, right? Let's get started with structure before we go to chunky candles. So what we got here, maybe double top, reaction going downwards, right? Sideways and then downwards here. Perfect. That's it. I don't need anything else in here, right? Now I can start throwing in what? Trend lines and then support and resistances, or support and resistances and then trend lines. Whatever you guys like, right? I'm so down. What platform? What platform? What, man? So all right. So yeah, we'll do that. Trading with OC, only fans, only charts, man. That'll be better. So Twitch, he says, no, right here. YouTube. It's gonna be chapter number 1. Trading with OC guy, naked charts, right? So that's gonna be chapter number 1, naked charts, which we already have going over a little bit, but we'll evolve it a little bit more, right? But I hope it's not a chromosome. Love it, man. All right. So at this point, can I identify maybe a trend? Yes, I can see it, but maybe I cannot use trend lines at this point. But this is a downtrend, so I can start using what? Downtrend lines. Maybe let's go for this one. Leave this one as a fake out. But wait, what am I seeing here on my chunky candles? Going down, right? Then little range, then V-shape recovery. This gives us what? 70% chances of ranging, and we ranged. You see, this is exactly what's happening with a Bitcoin. So it's not perfect. So that's why we're not aiming at the 70% chances of ranging. We're aiming at a 50, 65% of ranging, and we're ranging, right? So at this point, I have identified what? A Wyckoff accumulation scheme, right? Guys, this is a cheat code. That's what I'm showing it to you. So I know it says advanced, but if we stick, come on, this is advanced, but if we stick to the simplest part, well, then that's it. We got it, right? So this is a range. Perfect. Let's use a ranging tool in here. All right. So what we do on ranges? Well, maybe for the 4 hours, this has not enough movement, right? I'm still the most profitable in the 4 hours. So what am I going to be doing? Setting up an alert right as we're breaking. Not exactly, because remember, when I break a high volume area, I want a big body candle, a chunky big body candle going through, right? And then also when it comes down, because I'm not there yet, well then that is a possible my next trade, a long at the bottom of the range. So in this case, I'm putting my alert a little bit above from the bottom. Why? Because at this point, I'm not looking for a big chunky candle to go through. No. I'm looking for a small candle, right? To have flip of the ribbon, right? And if you have the RSI primed, where are you? RSI primed, right? Turn on. Oh, come on. This one needs to be bigger. There we go. By the way, quick tip, go into the settings, change the candle style to high Kineshi, click OK. We're looking for the itty bitty, tiny itty bitty candles, right? When we start seeing those midget candles, what we do, we start looking for resistances and we short it, all right? And then we short it. So that's what we're looking for, itty bitty candles at the top. We remember that we can go in within 3 candles and make a little range before dropping down. So maybe I cannot trade this on the 4 hours. Maybe I can. On my 4 hours, my setup is going to be long at the bottom, right? Remember, this is not just like blindly going long. This is going to be a setup area as I have what? Again, tiny candles at the bottom, right? Tiny candles at the bottom. And finally, tiny candles at the bottom, all right? So that's the same thing I'm going to be expecting at the top and at the bottom until I break through, retest your entry for the next possible long, and off we go. If not, if I start seeing tiny candles, I set a short position, right? Short position, give myself a wiggle room. Look at that. I'm going to the previous big area of resistance. Why? Because this is where we're going to be placing our, look at that, important. We bounce hard, we bounce hard, we bounce hard, we bounce hard, we bounced, right? So somewhere around here, right? But remember, that's not a flat line. That is a zone. So this is my zone of reversal. This is my shorting zone. So that means I can even grab my short. Let me just get rid of this and maybe push it a little bit higher to the median, right? That will enable me to set my stop loss here and give myself a little bit of a wiggle room. Just be careful with not pushing this all the way up. Why? Because if we have a big body candle, you'll be dooming yourself, right, to break out, retest, and off you go and getting stopped out. All right? Just a little bit of a heads up in there. So shorting zones somewhere around, let's add it, between 0.91 and 0.89, right? And longing zones, that will be less of a wiggle room at 0.81 for Ondo. All right, so breakout retest, remember, trade the retest. Let's take a look at what else? Sexy Mexi. Hey, I love it. Only Fibs. Oh man, you know what? I don't know what I never fell in love with Fibonacci, because when we're talking about design, like housing designs and other types of designs, the Fibonacci sequence, it's one of my favorites to use and repeat. Like squares, triangles, it's almost never a square. But start with squares, right? Triangles, because you then start moving, so on and so forth. But it never caught on to me when we talk about the lines of Fibonacci. Maybe I just need to study them more to fall in love with them. But yeah, we'll see. Let's see what else. We have Tron. Let's go and take a look at Tron. By the way, guys, remember that we're sticking to what we know at this point, all right? And then let's go to trading with OC and add it right here. It's going to be TRX for Tron. There we go. Do the perpetuals. And let's zoom out, guys. Remember, always market structure. So what do I see? A big AF range. Let's use one of our tools that we learned here, because we're lazy, right? Regression trend. Where roughly did the range started? I would say it's somewhere around here. So let's just pick it randomly, go all the way down. So we have a slightly tilted downwards range, right? So far, what we do when we see a range, we trade the range, right? We want the top and we want the bottom, right? I think you got it. So far, let's also add some support and resistance just for a good measure, right? Support and resistance, somewhere important points of bounce. Here, here, here because we have a breakout retest, right? Here, somewhere around these areas, I would say, all right? Look at that, it respected very nicely. So what am I gonna be aiming to? This zone. Remember, lines are not lines, are represent zones. So what can you do? Maybe you can maybe start looking for, I don't know, at these other important zones. Well, I do know these other important zones, right? And then also maybe adjusting it to the parts where it overshoot a little bit, right? So that's gonna be your entry point. There is a little caveat here that we could be making a lower high. If we miss the short entry, that's fine. You just let it go. And then we're gonna be looking for what? Our long entry. What are we looking there? Tiny candles, tiny candles, tiny candles. All right. So that's what we got right now on the 4 hour. Now let's zoom in because I believe that we might be able to trade the inner range. For that, let me clear this up, right? I see a very static setup here. Look at that. Very nice up, very nice down, very nice up, predicting very nice down, right? So downwards movement. So let's maybe try to go to 1 hour time frame. This will give us more candles per area, per candle, if you may say, right? Why? Because each candle represents 4 hours. In the 1 hour, each of these candles is gonna be 4 1 hour candles. That way we can read patterns a little bit better, right? So let's go to the 1 hour here. Perfect. So we have almost a pump and dump, right? Look at that, guys. What we got? Tiny candles going up. So do we have a support? Not really, but look at that. Maybe here. All right, so what can we be maybe expecting? Sweep of the lows and going up. Do you really want to take this long? Could be a long entry here. Maybe if we just like make it like this area of support and resistance, but we want to see it either breakthrough for confirmation or going back down. Are we on entry zones? Of course we are, all right? So are you gonna be taking it? No, I don't gamble with my money. What do I do? Well, I'm in crypto, so no gambling with my money. That's a bit of a statement, right? But I do try to use as much logic as I can, right? I try to go for like where I can count cards and not to a machine that has a predefined area. But by the way, let me tell you that Piper has some amazing stories with those kind of machines. So we are in an entry area right here. And then what we're looking for, it will be a breakout in here. So I want to see that breakout before I start going for my entry. So maybe breakout, 1 candle retest, confirming with another one in here, my entry somewhere around there, and off we go. So I'm going to be giving it some time. I'm going to be trying to long it here on the breakout retest or here on the sweep of the lows, right? So let me give you guys another set of support and resistances that are part of chart prime. So you just do here, this is liquidations, right? This is a free indicator. You add it, and this is giving you something that technicals will not give you if you don't have access to volume, all right? And that volume allocation, and that is where people have its allocation of money, basically where they're getting liquidated, right? Here or here. At this point, we are equally spaced from each other. But I believe because we're down here, will be easier to push it just a little bit lower here and then let it run for a much profitable movement. So just food for thought there. We're going to be diving deeper within these kind of indicators. But so far, look at that, just with an oscillator, support, resistance, strength, and a little bit of market structure, we can start trading right away. So guys, we'll do another session tomorrow. I'm going to be trying to get Photoshop working, but stick with me tomorrow. No, Monday, we're going to get started with chapter number 1, naked charts, right? So other than that, guys, thank you so much for joining. Really fills my heart to see you guys around. Hopefully you guys have an amazing day. I send you all of my good wishes and of course that your wallet grows and explodes out of profits. So other than that, guys, thank you so much for joining. And as always, see you guys tomorrow.